Numerous articles and podcasts have discussed DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, hiring practices. This media talked about how companies deliberately avoided hiring young white men, with this trend starting in 2014. A notable piece on this topic appeared in Not the Bee, link below. My goal here is to argue that this pattern began over a decade earlier, around 2000, if not before. DEI-style preferences trace back to the 1990s or earlier, rooted in affirmative action policies that evolved over decades. Historical context. Affirmative action began in the 1960s with executive orders in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, expanded in the 1970s to 1980s to include gender and broader diversity goals, and shifted toward corporate diversity management in the 1990s. I won't cite formal studies, statistics, or external articles. Instead, I'll share my personal experiences and observations from the early 2000s onward. These events convinced me that biased hiring practices, often favoring diversity quotas over merit, damaged an entire generation of men, including myself. Opportunities were taken away and given to less qualified candidates. I was told I had white privilege, yet that privilege never translated into employment. I spent years unemployed or underemployed. After serving a church mission from 1999 to 2001, I returned home at age 21 and began job hunting. With no specialized skills, I applied everywhere. Grocery stores, warehouses, entry-level positions, hoping for any income. I spent weeks dropping off resumes in person and mailing them out. Most applications were ignored. When I did get an interview, I was grilled intensely, as if a basic retail job required a lifelong commitment. Frustratingly, stores would hire almost anyone else, only for many to quit within months. The only reason I landed a part-time job was a referral from my brother. Without personal connections, my resume seemed worthless, even for low-skill roles. While working at this job, I noticed I was about 3 years behind my college-age co-workers, many of whom were seniors. When they graduated, they would secure real jobs, only to lose them quickly and return to our part-time gig. This pattern repeated among several young men, mostly white but not exclusively. One standout case involved a co-worker pursuing a business degree. He was thrilled to land a well-paying job after graduation, but he was back within weeks, fired. He had a drinking habit but still showed up on time and performed his duties, to my knowledge. The company used his drinking as an excuse, even though it hadn't affected his work. This happened in 2001. That part-time job eventually collapsed due to poor management. The owners refused to train new hires, leading to mass firings, including mine. A few months later, I found similar work with the same pattern. Young men, often college seniors, would graduate, get hired, then be laid off after a short time, returning humiliated and job hunting again for months. Another example, a co-worker with insurance experience and a relevant degree was excited about his new role. He poured his heart into it. But after a few months, he was laid off for what he described as a flimsy, forgettable reason. This occurred between 2002 and 2006. At the time, I blamed poor effort, bad degrees, or bad habits. Classic boomer thinking. In hindsight, I see it as companies finding excuses to terminate young men to meet diversity goals. I didn't realize the full picture until later. In 2003, I began a summer internship at a state agency. During a headquarters tour led by a female engineer, she openly stated that they needed more women in engineering roles. I remember rolling my eyes. She was essentially announcing preferential hiring to boost female numbers. At my college, I noticed similar patterns in engineering classes. Homework was equally challenging for everyone, yet many female students earned A's and B's, while most men, including me, struggled for C's despite putting in long hours. The women earning better grades belonged to female-centric organizations. They had been struggling until they became members of those clubs. It felt like special treatment. When graduation came in 2006, the state agency hired most female interns and those from underrepresented racial groups. A Hispanic friend, one semester behind, was told they would gladly hire him upon completion of his degree. I was not offered a position, and the interviews with the state felt like talking to a wall. Forced to job hunt again, I sent out resumes and received minimal responses. At a job fair, I applied to about 20 openings, companies actively hiring, and landed only 2 interviews. One led to a job, but it required moving 8 hours away. At that company, I noticed many young women had been hired in the prior 6 months to a year. I was one of the newest employees. The firm followed a sink or swim approach, no real training. Women's positions seemed secure, while men's were precarious. When work slowed, layoffs hit the newest, often male hires first, last in, first out. I was let go without hesitation. In the exit interview, the managers attacked me for leaving my desk to find them to get the job done. They were punishing work ethic and persistence. By late 2006, the economy had begun to weaken, full crash in 2008. I returned home, fell back on my old college job, and spent 6+ months facing constant interview rejections. I was now living the reality that I had seen so many of my coworkers endure. Many of them were still searching for white-collar full-time jobs. After getting hired at another engineering firm in 2007, I saw that a female classmate from college worked there. I was constantly sent to remote field sites, and my questions about the job drew sharp criticism. I was constantly told, "You should know this," while she remained in the office, being praised for all her efforts and walked through her questions. There was a clear double standard. My site manager scrutinized every report, demanding excessive length and nitpicking errors. Temporary inspectors who were boomer age wrote reports similar to how I had originally written mine and had no issues with the site manager. It felt targeted. Eventually, they fired me over a minor faux pas. My classmates stayed at the company for years afterward, well-trained and protected. Senior engineers later confirmed that I was making normal beginner mistakes and that the fault lay with inadequate training and a lack of support. Across engineering and other jobs, I faced relentless scrutiny. Nothing I did was right. By 2008, amid the economic crash, many young men were laid off from white-collar work. I was one of them. My fallback college job had also disappeared in the crash. I saw many 25 to 35-year-olds looking for any work that would pay their bills. They applied to grocery stores, warehouses, Home Depot, etc. Their applications were constantly rejected. At church, I exchanged my stories with the many young men around my age who had experienced the same thing. We shared stories about being rejected from the most basic jobs that were filled by young women or non-white candidates, many of whom lacked basic knowledge of the role. Merit seemed secondary to checking diversity boxes. To add insult to injury, many of these diversity hires didn't need the jobs for financial support. These patterns continued into the next decade and beyond, but they were already evident by 2000, a full decade before many claim DEI hiring intensified. By 2008, the practice had gone into full swing by not bothering to hire the white young men. The most qualified candidates are too often passed over for those who simply check a box. Meritocracy has eroded to the point it no longer exists. This has made stable employment difficult for late Gen X and millennial men. This has left the millennial men feeling as though they are not part of society and not welcome in it. The open prejudice in employment is part of why they don't care to be involved and don't care if society burns.